Some people have a fear of spiders. Others have a fear of holes. Some even have that fear that somewhere, somehow, a duck is watching them. But I bet you most of these don't lead to the kind of pain I've suffered, all because of my fear. I have food neophobia. What's that, you might ask? Food neophobia is basically extreme pickiness from a fear of eating, usually a fear of trying and eating new things. Like all phobias, it's an irrational fear. Even though this pickiness is common in children, it really wasn't that bad when I was a kid. Of course, there are things kids like and dislike, so my parents just sort of brushed it off. But as I grew older, it started getting worse. Compared to my parents and siblings, who are tan and had the right amount of muscle and fat, I was short, thin, and pale. In public, people would stare at our family. I could feel their eyes wondering if I was adopted or lost. But in reality, I was just scared of eating. I didn't much care what other people thought. My parents might have, but I'm not exactly what you'd call social. During playtimes at school, I preferred coloring in the shade alone to fun in the sun or whatever. So naturally, I wasn't very popular, and that was fine. Obviously, because of what and how I ate, kids at school started to think I was weird. For starters, I was too scared to touch my food. Even if it were a sandwich or a banana, I'd eat it with a spoon. Lunchtime also became a minefield for my phobia, as even seeing certain foods made me nauseous. Even something as simple as a ham and cheese sandwich might as well have been filled with maggots because that's how I saw a lot of new foods. So I often sat alone, facing away from everyone else. At home, at school, I never fit in. I didn't know what it felt like to fit in. I was sure even God had abandoned me. Still, of course, there were kids that made fun of me, took away my spoon, or tried to trigger me by shoving macaroni into my face. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how my parents responded to my food neophobia. They just didn't get it. I mean, who could blame them? There are doctors still trying to figure it out. But my parents just never seemed to understand the irrational part of irrational fears. They just thought I was being a fussy child who made them pack me a special meal separate from my siblings every day. As I grew, so too did this pickiness. And boy, were my parents frustrated. They couldn't bring me to birthday parties or dinner parties unless they wanted me to make a scene. Certain restaurants were off limits, and so were field trips. Because of this, I never really got a chance to connect with my siblings either, who were loved and spoiled by our parents, who saw me now less their daughter and more a problem to be solved. One of my mom's friends started talking about how kids who ate too much junk food tend to become picky. But we all knew that wasn't the case since I didn't even like junk food. Another friend suggested that she just encouraged the pickiness out of her 4-year-old son. So that's what my parents tried. But I wasn't 4. I was a teenager. So this only made me sick and throw up. A lot. I didn't see the point, but my parents were certain it would work, eventually. So they kept trying. They kept me at the dining table until I finished everything on my plate. It didn't matter if I couldn't even look at my food. It just had to be chewed and swallowed. I dreaded breakfast, lunch, and dinner even more now. And what I got used to wasn't the food, but the vomiting. I got used to the burn of my stomach acids surging into my throat after each meal. I kept this up for a couple of months, eat, smile, then as soon as my parents were gone, throw it all back up. I didn't even try to enjoy the food. Eating wasn't even about survival or nutrients or whatever at this point. It was just to please my parents. who had even told the teachers at school to make sure I finished my food, or otherwise let them know. I was so thin now that my teachers probably felt irresponsible if I didn't eat. So what did they do? They brought the whole class into it to encourage me, cheering me along with every bite I took. Before I knew it, I was eating for my parents, my teachers, my classmates, eating for everyone but myself. I felt like an animal performing in a circus. Every meal was just another performance. I remember one time I had carrots in my lunchbox, and something about them I just couldn't bear. I stared until I got lightheaded and couldn't see properly. But I could feel people looking at me. So I picked it up with a spork, put it in my mouth, chewed. "How delicious!" I lied. They cheered, clapped, pat me on my back. "You'll finally get over your picky habits," they joked, and swallowed the vomit down. I just laughed along and said, "Yeah, I was such a dork." It was pathetic. I didn't want the attention. I didn't want friends. I just wanted to belong for once. So I kept doing this, same as before. Eat, smile, then vomit when no one was looking. Until one day, during my first school trip, I fainted. Next thing I knew, I was on my way to the emergency room at the hospital. No. I was consumed in fear. No! The doctor or somebody was gonna figure out I still had the phobia, that I had been vomiting after every meal. Somebody was gonna tell my parents. And then my mom walked in, glanced at me, and walked over where the nurse told her that I was severely underweight, that I suffered from malnutrition, and that I had clearly not been eating enough. The entire time, I held my breath. My mom nodded and dismissed the nurse, then turned to me and asked, "Is it true you still have those habits?" And I confessed. Then she turned away and took a deep breath. She was ready to give up on me. I was still a problem, her problem. And with any problem, there comes a time when the frustration takes over and you start to believe that the answer is violent. A couple days later, I was back home at the dining table, my mother watching me like a hawk as I pushed a spoon of black beans into my mouth. At first, I tried to focus on something, anything other than the food I was eating. But all I did was make it worse because in my mind, the beans turned into beetles and my eyes watered. I was so scared that I couldn't help it. And just as it was ready to come back out, "Don't you dare!" I froze as tears streamed down my face. The doctor had recommended some sort of therapy since my condition was more psychological than physical, but my mom refused. I remember her yelling, "You have to get through this yourself," as I sputtered on the beans. For the next couple of months, they tried to encourage the phobia out of me, every meal, inside and out. "What is wrong with you?" they'd scream at my face. And honestly, I kind of wish it worked so I could finally be fixed. Be loved by them, the way my siblings were. But I wasn't about to be loved by anyone. I looked even more pale now, more frail, and more gaunt than I had ever been. Deep inside, I needed someone to notice. My classmates noticed. They used my condition and my appearance as ammunition against me. And for what, a laugh? "I bet your family just found you on the street," they'd say. Or, "You look like you're made of toothpicks." I didn't even have the energy to retaliate. So every day, I let their insults hit me until I snapped. "It doesn't matter what you say to me because it can't be worse than what my parents have said or done to me." They all fell silent. The next day, I was called to the principal's office and walked in just as the worst of them were leaving. Great, they got me in trouble, I thought. Luckily, I was wrong. Instead, they told the teachers about how my parents treated me. So they made up a new class that semester called Health and Well-Being, where I was the only student. My teachers even asked for a list of foods I could eat and brought me just enough every lunch so that I was no longer hurting my body. The list of food has gotten longer now as I've grown up a little and my neophobia has calmed down a little. I still have a complicated relationship with my parents. But I'm glad that even those who I thought were the wrong people found the compassion to help by finally recognizing that, even with my rare fear, I'm just a normal person, whatever that means. So for now, I'm just going to work on myself on my own and at my own pace.